Hello, welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. Today's date is the 10th of November 2014. Welcome to everyone, thanks for listening. Still here in Odessa, Ukraine. Tanks are rolling in from Russia, apparently at the moment, so probably make a move soon. Probably going to be here at least two more weeks unless things do get out of control here, but at the moment things are fine in Odessa. This is episode 31, so if there's any you've missed in the past, go check them out. The previous episode was featuring Julia Toriansky talking about anarchy. She's been on Alex Jones' show, you may know her from there. Check out our playlist on YouTube anyway to see all the episodes. Also on the last episode we talked about all the nuclear disasters and potential nuclear accidents that could occur, so go and check that out as well. Quick appeal to help with PR and sharing the episodes. Share on Twitter, Facebook with your friends, upload onto other sites. Appreciate any help you can give with that anyway. Also any help finding guests. If some people want to help with finding guests, please just contact me and let me know of any people that you can help provide as guests, or you can just email people that you want to come on the show, or email us and we can sort of help each other. Also, if you've got ideas for the show, if you've got ideas about topics, send those in as well. Remember to leave voicemails as well. What else? Donations. If you can help with donations, please help. Just donate on the donate button on YouTube. Quality control. If you hear any mistakes, things that haven't been edited out, just let me know, and that gives me a chance to go and check things out. Maybe occasionally, some editing may slip through. If you can help with graphics, pictures of anything, music, videos, articles, send them to us. We might be able to use them. If you're a researcher, let me know. And if you want to help, I can give you a topic and you can come back with information, either just written, which we can then use, or if you want to come on the show, that could be possible too. Anyway, if you've got any things that you can help with, contact us at scottsentinel9@gmail.com. So coming up in today's show, we'll have a bit of a quick look at the news from the mainstream, and as I said before, we don't necessarily believe it's all true, of course, just commenting on it. And we'll be looking at today's topic, talking with Anthony, our resident researcher, and we'll be looking at political correctness. Is it something that helps respect people, or is it just a form of speech control? That's coming up later. Then we'll be finishing off later with speaking to a philanthropist called Phil, who will be talking about utopian views of society, alternative ideas for how our society could be run. We'll be looking at lots of different topics there, and Phil will be coming back from time to time to keep contributing about that. Just a quick reminder about our offshoot shows called Sentinel Debates and Sentinel Chats, which you can find on the Truth Sentinel channel. Check those out. Sometimes they'll be the same. They'll be like previews of longer episodes. Like I might put up a Sentinel debate about political correctness, and that'll just be basically the first part of today's episode, but sometimes they're completely different, so check them out anyway. Today's news then. The Ukraine crisis. Apparently heavy bombardment recently in rebel-held Donetsk, as there's been reported over in the last few days that Russian tanks have rolled in on the east as well. I think about 32 tanks. But in the last 8 hours things have escalated apparently. Lots of bombardment of Donetsk area, and allegations that equipment's coming in from Russia. Still more than 4,000 people have died since April when the fighting started, and pro-Russian rebels control fairly large areas of eastern Ukraine. I'm currently in Odessa, which has had some troubles in the past, but at the moment You'd almost not know anything's going on apart from maybe it comes up in conversations with people. And it's pretty unpredictable as to what could happen. Things could change overnight almost. And if the war does spread, it will come to Odessa at some point. I hope it doesn't. The opportunity to stop this war is here at the moment. It depends a lot on a lot of factors. It doesn't really need to happen, this war. I don't think anyone here really knows what anyone's fighting for. It's basically because of decisions that leaders in Europe, the United States, the global community of countries, Russia and Ukraine itself, it's because of decisions that are being made amongst these leaders that this war is continuing. Any decent person would make an effort to stop this, because otherwise it'll turn into a bloodbath. Anyway, moving on to different parts of the world, hundreds of protesters in the Mexican state of Guerrero have attacked government buildings in the capital, burning cars, setting fire to buildings because of those 43 students that were killed. It sounds pretty brutal, basically. 43 students allegedly killed by gang members who they claimed were handed over to them by police. And it all sounds very dubious. So many things going on in countries that just defy imagination as to why they're happening. Over in Iraq, in Mosul, US airstrikes allegedly continue. I mean, we can no longer really believe the media as to what's happening. So I still think BBC serve a purpose in that you can sort of read between the lines, but we can't really trust them any more than we used to be able to trust newspapers such as Pravda back in the Soviet days. Pentagon has announced that 1,500 additional US troops will join the 1,600 military advisors already in Iraq. I'm sure they're doing a little bit more than advising. I'm sure these 1,500 additional troops will be doing a little bit more than advising as well. Let's just check and see if we've got any voicemails. Unfortunately not today, no voicemails. That's a pity. I really wish people would use that a bit more often. So if you get the chance, please leave a message on there. Let us know your views just on past episodes. I usually send out a tweet to let you know what the episode's about. Maybe I'll try and set up some kind of other system, because it seems like that's not maybe the best way, but it's there if you want to use it anyway. We almost did get moved on to a radio platform recently, Truth Frequency Radio. Let me know what you think about that, because there's a possibility of moving on to Truth Frequency Radio platform, which would get broadcast to areas like Denver and thousands and thousands more people. So let me know if that's a good idea. It's not happening at the moment, but it's a possibility. Celebrations being held in Germany to mark the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. I think it's great that they're celebrating that, and it came down in 1989, and it was like a powerful symbol of the end of the Cold War. But why was it there in the first place? A lot of these things, it's great when something good happens, but they should never have happened in the first place. Today or yesterday there was a blast at Nigerian school assembly, 47 students killed by a suicide bomber, and some really terrible pictures coming out from that particular event. I was thinking how it would be massive if that happened in Europe or in the States, such a big event like that with 47 students killed, but it'll probably disappear fairly quickly from the media just because it happened in Africa. It almost seems like people expect these things to happen over there now. Not going to dwell too much more on the news today. We all know there's bad stuff going on. I have to keep in contact really with the news and what's going on, but it can get a bit depressing if you just focus on it too much. That's why sometimes I want to have lighter episodes, just to get away from it sometimes, to be honest. So I told you about the last episode with Julia Toriansky, and we talked about nuclear accidents. Now we're going to go over to Anthony for a chat on political correctness, which we would love to hear your views about, even after the show. So go and use the voicemail service, which you can find on the About section of YouTube. So basically we'll be asking, is political correctness just another form of control, of controlling people's speech? Or is it just simply a way of respecting people, as somebody actually did send a message to me on Twitter? Somebody said, well, it's just a case of respecting people. But I personally think it's way more than that. I've got a very negative view of political correctness. So I'm going to have a chat with Anthony, see what he thinks. Anyway, let's go over to Anthony now. Merhaba, Anthony.
Merhaba, Scott. How are you?
I'm being persecuted by technology today.
Tell me about it. I know the feeling.
It seems like all the air conditioners, the laptops, fridges, they're all annoying me today. My fridge has a really nasty habit of every now and again starting to make a really loud noise that gets louder and louder and then makes clunking noises. My air conditioner does the same, and now my laptop started making noises, and it sounds like it's on its last leg. So that's not good. Yeah.
Well, my internet connection is highly dodgy tonight, so I'm guessing we're going to have to do this in segments.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it goes anyway. But today we were going to talk about political correctness. Is that right?
Yeah. Let's.
And whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yes. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I'll start off a little bit of an intro by saying that talking about political correctness, I personally hate it in pretty much all forms. But I mean, just to sort of give an overview, it's political correctness is obviously being careful not to offend or upset any group of people in society who are believed to have a disadvantage. I mean, the point, and I'll probably come back to it later, I want to make is that most of the time it's not the victims or the offended that are actually complaining. It's another group of people, the PC brigade, I call them, and some other people do. For me, it's just another form of control. It seems to me freedom of speech is dying fast anyway. That's being attacked on all fronts, and I refer you to Cameron's UN speech again for that. And I think people who support political correctness to a large degree, I think within a few years, when they're sitting in a government re-education centre for saying something that they shouldn't have said when their neighbours reported them to the authorities, then maybe they'll regret supporting political correctness. And I wanted to say that we're going to brainstorm some ideas and opinions about this topic today, but I also want to say, actually, that word itself, brainstorming, apparently a UK council has banned the term brainstorming.
Why is that?
And do you know what they've replaced it with?
Nope.
Thought showers.
Oh my god.
And excuse me.
Could we just enhance that a little by adding the word golden?
I don't know about that. That's very politically incorrect. But apparently a group of local lawmakers thought the term may offend epileptics.
Oh, Jesus.
Because it's like brainstorming is connected to epileptics, apparently. And anyway, I'll continue. I mean, basically... actually, sorry, I need to apologise again, because apparently it's not okay to refer to people as epileptics. According to the charitable organisation Epilepsy, there's a debate on whether to use the word epileptic or even words like fit or seizure. And they said basically it's important to look at the person before the medical condition. Thereby they prefer to say people with epilepsy, not epileptics. And in terms of whether to use the term seizure or fit, they suggest that you need to actually talk to the individual that you're referring to find out what they prefer. And this is I've just been saying that to give you an example of how ridiculous things have come. You literally almost cannot say anything these days. The thought police are watching you. It's straight out of George Orwell's 1984. I mean, back in the 1990s, lots of jokes were made about political correctness, and everybody thought they were kind of really funny. But now, I think it's becoming beyond funny. I think it's becoming serious. Political correctness has become a way of life in many countries.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say the wrong thing now, you can lose your job. You can end up in court. Every single day, the mainstream media bombards people with subtle messages that make it clear what's appropriate to say and what's inappropriate today. And most people fall in line with this unwritten speech code. And I think it's imbalanced. Basically some, for example, when it comes down to minority groups or religions, some are promoted more than over more than others. And cultural groups can be promoted in an imbalanced way compared to others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the problem with political correctness, and I don't know if I'm sure you'll tell me in a minute whether you agree, but I think most people who are racist or sexist are usually quite open about it. I've met racists and sexist people before, and they're actually very open about it. So those caught in a political correctness trap, they're usually not racist or sexist, but they're just being caught in this new maze of words that we have to choose from. What's your views on political correctness?
Well, I'm a little divided. I mean, I think there are two main parts. There's the part mostly concerned with language, and there's the part which is concerned with action. And I think we need to talk about both. But so far, you've mainly talked about language, and I've got a foot in either camp, to be honest.
Anthony, I have to stop you. You can't use the word camp. It would offend homosexuals. So you need to, even if you've used it in a different context, it's still offensive. So
oh dear.
I think you need to retract that word.
Can I say that I've got one foot on either side of the fence?
I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. That might offend. That may offend practitioners of genital. Never mind. So yeah, look, I'm going to come at this partly from an Australian point of view, just because I've heard a lot of the debates in Australia, more so than in other countries, and I don't know if the arguments are similar in the UK. So let's compare as we go along. In Australia, I've seen three main arguments against what they call the PC Brigade. The first one is about freedom of speech, and I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about that. The second argument is that the PC Brigade are kind of basically a bunch of latte liberals. They look down on the uneducated masses from their inner city Sydney cafes and so on. And according to that argument, the PC Brigade, they feel like they need to enforce a respectful code of speech on everybody else.
Actually, I have to stop you again, Anthony. I'm offended that you say latte liberals, because you seem to be suggesting there's a certain group of people who order their lattes, and you're actually grouping me in with that, because I sometimes have the odd latte, and I'm quite offended by that.
Oh my God. You liberal. But yeah, the idea is that the criticism is that these people feel like if they don't guide people from above, then everybody else will just devolve into kind of racist, homophobic bigots, and eventually kind of coalesce into a big lynch mob. So in other words, the anti-PC folk say that political correctness is a form of elitism, and it shows a kind of loathing for ordinary people. So that's the second criticism that I've heard. The other argument is that PC is an expression of what economists call positional good or positionality. Now, this positionality is something that we're all familiar with. It's when people try to show that they have a relatively high position in the social hierarchy, and one way they do this is by consuming or acquiring things that supposedly say something about them. Yeah. So maybe for example, I buy a brand of an expensive brand of wine, and partly it's because I like the taste, but maybe it's also a way of setting myself apart from other people by showing that I'm somebody who understands, the finer things in life and so on. And this carries a positional good. It helps me position myself highly in the social hierarchy. this is something we know that marketers and advertisers exploit all the time, but it extends way beyond just what products you buy. It can be about what university you choose to study at, and in the 90s, when this terminology was appearing, there was even this idea that being alternative offered some positionality to young people. So they could complain that their old favorite bands had all sold out or whatever, and that would position them well on the social hierarchy. So the anti-PC people in Australia say that PC language is just another form of this. So by using the right language, you're positioning yourself more highly on this kind of imaginary ladder, that has enlightened and open and tolerant people at the top and ignorant racist idiots at the bottom. And if you criticize other people for not being more PC, then you're pushing them down the ladder for your own benefit.
Okay.
That's the criticism. Of course, if that's true, then being PC actually has nothing to do with caring for other people at all. So I don't know, that's the debate in Australia.
I don't know, to be honest. I think there's a number of groups that are for and against political correctness, but I guess different people have their different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But just generally, I don't like it.
Sure. Okay. Well, look, I want to say in some cases I agree with some of those arguments, or maybe all of them, but in other cases I think they totally miss the point, because the issues here are actually a lot simpler sometimes. I mean, we've all seen instances where a person says something and then they get shouted down because what they've said might offend someone, and then you think it through and you think, what is the big deal with what that person said, and then you realize, well, the PC Nazis are just being, precious and silly, and you just kind of want them to go away so we can all talk like adults, But I think it's dangerous to generalize about that, because I don't think that's always the case. And in some cases I would fully support the PC Brigade, and I want to give you an example. This comes from the rather dark and disturbing world of Australian sport. There's a former rugby player in Australia called Andrew Johns, who's considered to be one of the great rugby league players of all time. Now, for those who don't know, rugby league is an Australian football code, and it's like a kind of, I would say, a vastly dumbed down version of rugby union, So not what you'd call a thinking man's game, but Johns was a master of the game, and he retired in.
Anthony, I have to stop you. You said thinking man's game.
Oops.
You're not being very inclusive there.
I'm not.
Surely sometimes women like to watch that.
That's true. Okay, so it's not what you'd call a thinking person's game, or indeed a thinking being's game.
You're excluding excluding insects there.
But no, Johns, he retired in 2007. Then he went into coaching, and he coached the New South Wales Rugby League team. Right? Now the biggest matches on the Rugby League's annual calendar are between New South Wales versus Queensland, because those are the two Australian states where league is most popular, and there are 3 of these matches every year. In 2010, just before one of those matches, a New South Wales player called Timana Tahu caused a huge stir by pulling out of the New South Wales team. Now, Tahu's father was a New Zealand Maori, and he's Aboriginal, and he withdrew from the team.
Sorry, you cut out there. Can you?
Sure. Now, Tahu's father was a New Zealand Maori, and his mother was an Australian Aboriginal, and he withdrew from the team because of something that Andrew Johns had said during a training session. Mm-hmm. Apparently, Johns had called one of the players on the opposing team, and I'm quoting him here, he called one of the players a black cunt, right? So Tahu objected to this, offensive characterization of a black player, and he left just before the game. That made it into the Australian press, and then a bunch of other stuff about Johns started to emerge, and we had, the full-blown controversy on our hands. So players started admitting that they'd heard this guy, Andrew Johns, this league legend, they'd heard him regularly using racist epithets to refer to black players. He was using terms like nigger and black bastard and monkey and coon.
Anthony, you're a racist. you just used lots of racist words there.
I did. I'm sorry.
So you are a racist.
Well,
Because
Okay.
I just wanted to make a quick point. When I said that, I was just one thing I've noticed about political correctness is that nobody cares about the context that the word's been used in. So you were quite obviously there talking about using those words to explain the situation, but a lot of people in the PC brigade don't care. They don't care they don't care what the context is. You are now a racist for using those words.
Well, this is true, but in this case, the anti-PC brigade, I think, were used the context as an excuse. But not so with football players. Among football players, including black football players, there was quite a range of reactions. So some of them were grievously offended, and they pointed out that racist sledging could really distract them, and when it happens to them, it can have a negative effect on how they play. And there are others who felt kind of offended, but not all that seriously, and then others just shrugged it off. This is part of life in Australia, which unfortunately is true. Now, I think all of those responses are valid, but in the media there were voices defending Andrew Johns in some ways which I think are unacceptable. You can partly understand the motivation because, like I said, he was a great player, he was a rugby legend and so on, and nobody likes to see the image of a champion tarnished. What's his name? Lance Armstrong. Similarly, I think people were willing to suspend disbelief for a while because he was such a great champion. But in this case, you had a lot of pathetic excuses. People in the media were saying that, in the rough and tumble of professional sports, sometimes strong language is used as a kind of motivator to get people fired up, and it's part of the intensity of the game and so on. And the people who were saying those things were trying to recast this whole thing as like an attack by the PC brigade, which it wasn't. The other side who were criticising Johns, they were just saying, look, you're bringing down the tone of public speech. You're in a position where, a lot of league fans, a lot of rugby fans are kids, yeah, and it's not a great example to set for them to run around calling other people black cunts. And I don't think that's being excessively PC, but it was attacked as that at the time. If professional sports people are saying, look, this guy pissed me off so much that I couldn't concentrate and I couldn't play, and he was doing it all the time, well, then I think the onus is on him to clean up his act a little and be a bit more respectful.
I completely understand that, but I guess it is connected to political correctness, but I would just say he sounds like a bit of a nasty piece of work anyway.
He absolutely is.
He's trying to motivate people by insulting them, and I think there is a line to be drawn between political correctness and insulting people. If you're constantly insulting people and using racist terminology constantly, it's a bit different to political correctness, where often in political correctness cases, it's a one word that offends people. Whereas in this case, he's reeling off constantly. He's doing this constantly and being abusive and insulting.
Yeah, but the issue here is that the anti-PC people jumped on it as a chance to say, oh look, political correctness gone mad, when it wasn't at all, And I live in a society that has free speech, and it's true that, for example, in the world of academia, free speech is being eroded by the need to be politically correct. I think that's a very disturbing trend. In academic papers, there are an increasing number of things which you just can't say, and that's awful. Are you there?
Yeah, still listening.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
I was still offended by some of the things you've said so far.
I'm sorry. But it's, by the way, it's particularly I'm going off script here, but never mind. It's particularly disturbing in America because some of the early American founding fathers and so forth specifically said that in an academic context there is no idea which is not allowed in, provided we still have logic with which to refute the bad ones. So in other words, it's open slather, say what you like, is kind of enshrined in the early history of the States, and the States is unfortunately one of the epicenters of PC thinking, and that is eroding academic academic research. But if we go back to sport for a moment, if we go to this case, I also want to live in a society where people generally show respect. And I don't think that's excessively PC.
That's true. But I think with political correctness and with using certain words, it's the intent that matters. And the guy that you mentioned, his intent wasn't good. He was deliberately being abusive, insulting. In a lot of political correctness cases, these people aren't necessarily trying to be abusive or insulting. Yeah, it's just that they didn't know the correct terminology to use. And I think also with a lot of these cases, people should be able to say whatever they like, even this guy maybe, but they should deal with the repercussions.
Yes.
So say what you like, there may be repercussions. That's what I would say.
Fair enough. I want to give you another example, and I think you're going to like this one. Because this is where I depart from PC. I think sometimes, in terms of just the language, the language of PC, I think sometimes people just become so obsessed with correct language that it kind of overshadows everything else, and it becomes ridiculous, and ironic in some cases. Again, this example comes from an Australian source. There's a guy called Brendan O'Neill. He's the editor of an Australian magazine called Spiked, and he's a bit of an anti-PC campaigner. He's been talking about this for years. So he gave an example from the US invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. During that invasion, some soldiers in the US Navy were writing messages for the Taliban on the sides of their missiles, which we've seen before. Now, in reference to the September 11th hijackings, this one soldier wrote the words, "Hijack this, you faggots," on the side of a missile, right? And he got caught. I don't know, it turned up in a photo or on film or whatever. Now, you would think that at a time of conflict, I think you would think the Navy would flag the issue, but maybe, shelve it for another time when they didn't have quite so many other urgent things to deal with. But apparently not. It caused a huge stir. Everything stopped, and the Navy command was described as being outraged, right? So they issued a statement, and the statement said, I'm going to quote again here because I think it's quite funny. The statement said, Navy personnel should more closely edit their spontaneous acts of penmanship.
They're being politically correct in their terminology there.
They certainly are. And then the High Command went on to publish a set of guidelines, unofficial guidelines, but guidelines of what you could or could not write on the side of a missile. So according to this Australian journalist O'Neill, the statement "I love New York" was approved, right? But the word "faggot" was prohibited. Now,
but I just wanted to make a comment here. These people should lead by example. The people that are criticising, the authorities that are criticising what they're written on the bombs, because probably the very same people are involved in the fact that they created Osama bin Laden dolls with the face of a demon to be distributed to children in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
How crazy is that? What kind of message does that give to other cultures? So, I think it's messed up. It's all messed up,
I don't know if you saw any of the leaflets that were dropped on Iraq by PSYOPs, but some of them included pictures of Muslims, with the instructions, like if you cooperate with us, this will happen, if you don't, this will happen. There were pictures of people in Muslim clothing, and they were just the most terrible caricatures. They were really offensive. But anyway, getting back to this, some people in the US were offended when they saw the photo because faggot is an offensive word, right? It's rarely used as a way of expressing one's right to free speech. It's just an insult,
Yeah.
So some people in the USA didn't like that, and fair enough. Because it sort of implied that being gay and being like a repressive Taliban fuckhead were kind of as bad as each other, which is not good. But at the same time, there was a real irony in the Navy's response. And I think this tells you a lot about what's wrong with some forms of political correctness and how it can kind of warp people's perspective on the world. Because, the missile with the faggot message on the side of it was actually dropped in Afghanistan. And the intent, of course, was to kill fighters who were fighting against the US Navy.
I think the bigger problem there is it's nothing to do with political correctness. It's to do with the dumb attitude of some of the people in the military, just even wanting to write stupid stuff like that on the side of a bomb. I think there needs to be a bit more education about having a bit more respect, and just not being such a dumbass.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Smart bombs, dumb Texans. But look, essentially, when they brought out these guidelines, what you are and are not allowed to write on the side of a missile, so the position becomes this: it's okay to kill people. That's what we're here to do. But it's not okay to use a word that offends them. And
they're going to read it anyway.
Exactly. As O'Neill, this Australian journalist, put it, dropping missiles on someone's town is fine, just so long as those missiles don't have anything inappropriate written on them, which of course is just ridiculous.
We were going to talk about another issue, maybe in another episode, about the reclassification of weapons as well. How one type of chemical weapon is fine if it's called an incendiary bomb or something used by the US Army, whereas something that people refer to as a chemical weapon used by the Syrian Army is not correct, but it's actually pretty similar. The results are similar. People's skin ends up dripping off their their bones.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have to understand the distinction between, wholesome, whole grain, corn-fed chemical weapons and scary, subversive terrorist chemical weapons. That's a crucial distinction to make. But look, we could dredge up hundreds more examples, and we'd obviously be here all night.
Well, I'd like to. We may be here all night, but I'd like to give you a couple of some stupid political correctness examples.
Please, yeah.
A UK recruiter was stunned when her job advert, which she put out online for a reliable and hard-working applicant, was rejected by the job centre as it could be offensive to unreliable and lazy people. These are all real cases, so they didn't like the fact she was putting a job advert for a reliable and hard-working person because it's going to offend people who aren't.
But if you're unreliable, how can anyone know when you'll be offended?
Indeed. Some US schools now have a holiday tree rather than a Christmas tree because you've got to be inclusive of all religions.
Yep.
And I mentioned that before. You've got to be inclusive of all religions, but then there's minority religions where they're allowed to be inconclusive of all other religions. So it seems like, for example, it's not okay to have a Christmas tree. That's a holiday tree, but respect all Muslims and their names for their holidays. There's no equality in a lot of these political correctness.
I would tend to agree, but I also think it's overstated. And actually, Fox News is a big culprit. On this particular front, they constantly bemoan the death of Christmas. But as far as I can see, there's no death of Christmas. Celebrated for 2 months. The decorations go up as soon as the first, whiff of snow or whiff of winter occurs. We're in Christmas mode, so I don't think there is any death of Christmas. I
think it's more the terminology again. Nobody's suggesting that the Christmas phenomenon and the marketing campaign has disappeared. Yeah. Let me just continue with a few more.
Sure, yeah.
I think this is where there is some anti-Muslim feeling in the UK because we're constantly bombarded with the political correctness result of the situation. For example, there was an advert of a picture of a dog with a policeman's helmet on to recruit policemen. There was a poster with a cute little dog and a policeman's helmet. I can't remember what the caption was. But anyway, the advert apparently upset a lot of Muslims because dogs are considered ritually unclean. And it sparked a lot of anger, so some shopkeepers in Dundee refused to display the advert. And Dundee councillor Mohammed Asif said, "My concern was that it's not welcomed by all communities with the dog on the cards. So the police should have understood." And since then, the police apologised and took down the campaign. Now, I would say no, they shouldn't have apologised. They should not have apologized. They should not have taken the picture down, because you cannot pander to all elements in society. If it's obviously using common sense. It's not offensive to have a picture of a dog on a poster. So you cannot keep letting minority religions or even majority religions say, no, we don't like that, we don't like this, you've got to change that. And it's happening a lot. And I think regarding the Muslim issue in the UK, this is where a lot of anti-Islam feeling is coming from, these constant controlling mechanisms that people just don't like. They don't like being told what to do like this. Well, yeah, I totally agree. As you know, I live in an Islamic country, and Kayseri, my hometown, has a reputation of being a conservative city. You know, all of our students leave the university on Friday to go to mosque and so on. And my neighbour downstairs, colleague of mine, has a dog, and some maintenance workers will not come into the flat until she removes the dog from the flat. But that is not universal. So some of them are all about dogs, and some of them are totally fine, and they're equally devout Muslims. So I would say to the people who are getting all upset about dogs, well, it's not universal. Not everybody in your religion feels that way. So God, just chill out, would you? And I'd like to apologise as well. I said pandering to all faiths. Oh, you must have offended some Chinese people there. Well, no, I may have offended some pandas there. You know. Yeah. Okay, but look, there's more seriously. There is a counter to this, and I wasn't planning to mention this tonight, but. There's a bit of an attack in Australia at the moment on the burqa. The Australians are trying to ban the burqa. Oh, sorry, not Australians. The ruling Liberal Party of Australia is trying to ban the burqa, and they're doing this specifically as a means of raising fear. Their contention is that people who wear the burqa, and look, there's something like 250 women in the whole country who wear a burqa, but people who wear a burqa are a security risk because they could be hiding arms under the burqa. That's the government's contention. There's one senator in particular who has run ads about this and given speech after speech about this. She ran an advertisement which showed a woman in a burqa holding a pistol, and this was a picture that accompanied an advertisement about how the burqa is a security risk. Now, luckily, she was found out, and I say luckily because that woman, the woman in the photo, was the first female police officer in Afghanistan. She was using the gun in her job to protect the rights of women in a very male-oriented society. That's why the police employed her, is to deal with issues of domestic violence and other things like this. So the woman posed for a photograph with her gun for an American photographer. Probably not a very wise thing to do. However, this woman was a hero, and by the way, she has since been executed by the Taliban. So then this stupid Australian retard, that's a piece of it. I know, and we're going to talk about that word. This stupid Australian senator takes this photo of a heroic woman who risked her life and paid with her life to protect the rights of others, and says, look at this woman, she's a security risk, we've got to ban the burqa in our country. And in the course of doing that, she says, and I'm going to quote her words if I can find them, we should not be afraid of the politically correct people in this country. We should act in a way that ensures our security. Now, there is no security threat from the burqa in Australia, none whatsoever. And this Islamophobia thing is being used as political capital, and at the same time, this suspicion of all things PC is being rolled in to the fear cocktail, and I really, really don't like that. I think this woman should be kicked out of Parliament. But you know, I definitely think some people are using it to their advantage. Her name, sorry, by the way, because I think it should be famous. Her name is Jackie Lambie. If you see that name again, which I think you may. Yeah, this woman is evil, and she is using the anti-PC ticket and the Islamophobia ticket together
to create a political career for herself, which otherwise she wouldn't have, because she's basically an idiot, even by Australian political standards.
People use these issues, all different types of groups, but I'm not defending her. But I did want to mention two cases in the UK. One where a woman wearing a burqa, and I don't even know if she was a Muslim. She basically she used the burqa. Some people are using a burqa to hide behind. She threw acid over a woman's face, and obviously because in the UK, in London now, we have more surveillance cameras than anywhere else in the world. So some people in some situations are using burqas to bypass this surveillance state. So she wore a burqa and threw acid over this woman's face, disfiguring her for life. And it was obviously difficult to identify. Now the second refused to take off her burqa in a court of law to identify herself. So she was being accused of something, but it was a serious crime she was being accused of. And she refused to refused to take off her burqa in court. So nobody could see her, and she was saying, well, it's her religion to wear a burqa, and that no men are allowed to see her face, whereas the court was saying, but how are we supposed to know who you are, and so I think the problem is when people start doing things like that, that's when she's helping people like this crazy woman in Australia, because that people are doing things, pulling stunts like that.
I agree. The second issue that you mentioned there, when the issue of when is it okay to enforce somebody to take off a religious garment? That's an extremely thorny issue. I think that's one that it's very difficult to unpack that issue in a way that's fair to everyone.
Also, in the UK, you're not allowed to walk into a bank wearing a crash helmet. You have to take off your crash helmet so that bank tellers can see who you are, and the surveillance cameras can see who you are, for in case you're going to hold up the bank or something. Should it be right that someone wearing a burqa is allowed to bypass that because of their religion? They're allowed to walk in unidentified. There are some issues that come up because of the burqa.
I agree. It is a very difficult issue. I mean, you could point, for example, to other examples where people get a free pass on things because of their religion. For example, there are certain Native American tribes who are legally allowed to consume peyote, whereas everybody else is not, because for them peyote is part of their system of belief.
And now, Rastas allowed to smoke marijuana as well.
Now, is that fair? I think it's a very difficult question to answer.
It is.
But on the first point about using the burqa as a disguise, okay, it could be used as a disguise, but are you going to tell me that we should, I mean, if we ban the burqa for that reason, then we should also ban balaclavas?
No, I wasn't saying that we should ban it. I was just saying that there are some real cases that have come up. That's all I was saying. I wasn't saying it should be banned.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I also want to talk about one case in which I do use PC language as a statement against a group of people that I really dislike, and this concerns Ukraine. As you know, it used to be called the Ukraine in the West, and then at some point it was decided that putting the at the front was un-PC, right?
Yeah, I've heard about this. I think people are getting way too easily offended these days.
Well, I don't know if Ukrainians are offended. I mean, I've heard older Ukrainians and Russians say, well, their equivalent of the Ukraine, but they haven't said it to other Ukrainians or Russians. They've said it to me, so it's difficult to gauge the reaction. But it is a really curious one because, again, as you know, neither the Russian nor the Ukrainian language has the word the in it. So why is the a problem?
Isn't it to do with republics and things like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I do, regardless of that, I do observe the politically correct rule of not saying the Ukraine, and I want to tell you why. See, the word Ukraine relates semantically to the word Kraina, and Kraina means borderlands or the periphery. And of course, when it was part of the USSR, and before that part of the Tsar's domains, that's essentially what Ukraine was. It was the borderland, Now, in English, we say in Japan, because Japan is a country, but we say on the borderlands, right? And in Russian, very roughly speaking, the word v means in, if you put it with a place name, and the word na means on. So older Russians tend to say na Ukraine, on Ukraine, and that kind of implies that Ukraine is not so much a country as just an outlying border region of a larger sovereign entity.
Okay, I'd just like to butt in quickly here with a point about, again, with political correctness, it's the intent. I doubt very much whether a lot of people sat there and thought, I'm going to use the when I refer to Ukraine, just to tell them what I think of, the borders of their country. That's where political correctness is nonsense. I think people should get over it.
Well, in this case, I don't think it is nonsense. And let me just give you the alternative version. So, as I said, the older Russians tend to say na Ukraine, on Ukraine. Younger Russians, I've noticed, tend to go for v Ukraine, which is in Ukraine, and that gives it country status, right? Now, yeah, I agree with you up to a point. It's kind of silly. Who really cares at the end of the day?
Well, for foreigners, I mean, the people I'm talking about are foreigners coming from other countries who have no clue about this. I mean, don't get on their back. They're not aware of this issue. I also try and say Ukraine instead of the Ukraine. Occasionally, I do say the Ukraine. But it just shouldn't matter. People need to get over the small intricacies of language like that and not be offended, because there's too many far more important issues in life to deal with.
Well, in many cases, I would agree, and I think this is for me personally, this is a counterexample, and the reason is that, of course, we've seen a horrible conflict this year in Ukraine, and it looks like it's about to, unfortunately, kick off again. Now, some of the people, and I'm emphasizing some of the people on the eastern side of that conflict have talked about this concept which they call Novorossiya, right? New Russia. And that's kind of an enlarged Russia. The idea is quite old, it goes back centuries, but it periodically disappears, then resurfaces, and it's not completely unlike Hitler's idea of grabbing more Lebensraum for the German folk. Now, generally, I think you can say two things about most of the people who are making a point at the moment of talking publicly about Novorossiya. Firstly, they're generally neo-Nazi, ultra-nationalist heads, right? That's the first thing. And secondly, they see Ukraine very much in na Ukraine terms, not in v Ukraine terms. So they see it as on Ukraine, not in Ukraine. And if they were English speakers, and generally they're not, and many of them I suspect probably struggle with the basic syntax of their own language, but if they were, they would probably be the people putting the in front of Ukraine. So that's why I don't do it. It is a small, silly semantic saying that doesn't hurt anyone, the way, bombing their town or...
Sorry, can you please repeat the last sentence cut out?
Sure, yeah. So that's why I don't. The Ukraine doesn't hurt anyone, like, say, bombing their town or starting a gun battle in their street would hurt them. But I personally feel like using the formulation that these nationalist heads would not use. And I think that's sometimes the motive for people being PC. Sometimes it is a form of control or status seeking or whatever you want to say. But sometimes it's about people trying to be respectful or inclusive, and sometimes it's about distancing yourself from heads. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I'm more than happy to do that.
I think if you're aware of the situation, fine, do it. But I just think it's too much of a big deal over nothing. Mm-hmm. Especially since most people who are going to say the in English would have no clue about what you're talking about there. So
yeah, maybe not. And
I wanted to say a little bit of something about political correctness in regard to visiting other countries.
Sure.
It often seems to me that people are very accommodating of foreigners in their own country making demands.
Mm-hmm.
But when they themselves go to another country, they would never dream of making any demands. And I'm sort of talking about the anti-Muslim problems we have in the UK at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if someone goes to Saudi, they would never dream of demanding that Christian churches get built or
mm-hmm.
their wishes are respected, their religious wishes are respected. But I think we have a problem sometimes in the UK of constant demands being made by other religions, which it would never be reciprocated. And so I think that's partly the issue that people find they get a bit annoyed about. It's like, well, if I go to your country, number one, I can't demand anything. It would not be implemented. Number two, I wouldn't do it out of respect. I respect your country and the way it's been set up, your religion, your culture. I don't expect you to change your society for me. But in the UK, they are making demands and they are expecting things to change. So I think this is where some of the animosity comes from.
Yep, I agree. I would make two points about that, though. First of all, I have met Western women. This is a very small minority, but I have met them, who they'll go on holiday in a country like Egypt and they'll make a point of not being careful about how they dress.
Really?
And if anybody says anything about it, they'll launch into a rant. So not everybody is as respectful as you, Scott.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought most people would.
Most people, but not everybody. Yeah, but that's the first point. The second point is sometimes it's our problem, not the problem of the people who we're talking about now. And let me just tell you about one case. In November of 2009, there was a U.S. Army psychologist, quite ironically. His name was Nidal Malik Hassan.
I know this case, yeah.
So, he killed 13 people. Yeah, he just opened fire with a machine gun, shouting Allah Akbar.
That's right, yeah.
And killed 13 people. Now, obviously a deeply disturbed individual, but the point here is the Pentagon knew that this guy had been sending emails to radical imams, and he had been making official policy recommendations for Muslims serving in the US Armed Forces that were becoming increasingly bizarre. He was known about, and there were co-workers and colleagues which, after the incident, talked about him and said that, well, the phrase I've got here is ticking time bomb. Yeah, so this guy was flagged as somebody who was going to do something dreadful. He was very conflicted about being a Muslim in the US military, and middle management were aware of it, but they ignored it because they were afraid of being accused of profiling him. Now, that's not his problem. He had enough problems, but that particular issue is not his issue. That's the issue of the US military, and I believe that's quite often the case, is that we are the problem when we are being too PC. It doesn't help anybody. It didn't help Nidal Malik Hassan that people were too afraid to say, hello, you're clearly going off the rails here because of this Muslim US Army thing. Can we help you?
But that is a result of the PC brigade.
Yes, absolutely, but it's our issue. That's what I'm saying. It's not.
What do you mean? Because it's not my issue. I don't think there should be political correctness, and therefore he would have been flagged. The PC brigade have created this scenario where people like him will get away with it because of the political correctness. People are too afraid to speak. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. But I don't know if it's necessarily the case of him getting away with it so much as he descended into a very, very dark place, and nobody was willing to try and arrest that descent because people were too afraid of offending him, which is just insane. Well, this is what I was talking to Jasvinder Sanghera about as well, with honour killings and disappearances of children in UK schools. Who, if it was a British white child, or European child, then huge questions be asked. Where is this child? Why have they disappeared? If it's from a minority religion or ethnicity, then no questions are asked because people don't want to delve into it because they're again going to be accused of being racist or not politically correct. And this is why political correctness is a dangerous thing. It's in some cases, it's resulting in people's deaths, in the cases of honour killings, disappearances, forced marriages, as you just mentioned, in the deaths of people, in this case with Nidal Malik Hassan, who killed 13 people, one of them pregnant, Yep. I know. Yeah, I totally agree. I absolutely agree on that point.
I'm gonna have to say it's not always dangerous, but I absolutely agree it can be dangerous, and it needs to be. We need to be very vigilant in terms of. We do want to. I think it is important to not use language that offends people in certain situations, and I also think it's important to find the limits to that and say, okay, this is important, but there are other considerations as well, and we shouldn't blow it out of context and thereby ignore more important things.
Well, I think the other thing that political correctness does, this whole environment, it makes sometimes I just want to go on a long tirade of just using completely unpolitically correct words, just because I feel so suppressed sometimes. With absolutely stupid situations like the blackboard situation. You're not allowed to say blackboard. It's racist when it's clearly a black thing and it's a board. Unless you've got a swastika on your forehead and saying I hate blacks, then it's nothing to do with it.
I know. And you also have to ask. If it is racist if a brown-skinned person points at a whiteboard and calls it a whiteboard.
Yeah, exactly. This is the inequality I was talking about as well. I mean, there's one thing I noticed in the UK when I was looking for accommodation in London. Now, there's lots. I'm not joking. There's loads of them. I don't know if they've been taken down, but they were certainly okay 6 months ago on a place called Gumtree. If you're looking for a room in London, it's now okay for minority groups to say things like Asians only, please. Must, and some of them are trying to even be a little bit more politically correct by saying must like Indian curries. And they don't mean it's okay for a white person to come and live with us if they like Indian curries. What they're saying is Asians only, but there's actually quite a large number of adverts now in London saying Asians only.
But Scott, it's well known that every white English person loves Indian curries and drinks tea at 5 p.m.
Yeah, absolutely. But then I could call and say I do like curries. Can I come and live there? And they'll just say I think you didn't get the idea of the advert. But what I'm saying is if it's one-sided. If I was to write whites only on an advert in the UK, I would be probably prosecuted and possibly even put in prison. And yet these people are allowed to write Asians only because it's a minority group. You're allowed to do what you like. It's imbalanced.
On the other side of that, there are places where you can get away with writing that kind of stuff, and you and I have both lived in one of those places, and it's Lviv in Ukraine. You visited my wife's flat in Lviv several times, and just near her flat, there's an underpass, and across the entrance to the underpass is written the slogan "White Power Zone," and you can get away with that in Ukraine. I don't think that makes it a more pleasant place to live.
Well, I'm afraid Ukraine is quite a racist country. And if I have offended anyone, because we do have some Ukrainians listen, I'm sorry, but that's just a case. I said to one of my classes in Ukraine when I was teaching English here, is Ukraine racist? They said no, and I said, would it be okay, this was in Lviv, for more black people to come to Lviv? And they said no. And I said, why? And they said, we don't want black people coming here. And this is the same class that said they're not racist. So I think there's a confusion as to what racism is over here, but it certainly seems so to me.
Let's talk about something silly. We were talking about this last night when we were chatting about the show. I just wanted to bring it up briefly because it's one very un-PC word which I love to use, but it offends a lot of people, and the word is retarded.
Right, retarded, yes.
Yes. Now, apparently, I haven't seen the movie, but this word was used quite a lot in the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. And there was a backlash against that. There were organisations like United Cerebral Palsy writing angry letters on their websites and condemning the movie and so on. And they were talking about the use of the R word. And look, I totally understand why it's offensive, especially in that context, because in the movie, though I haven't seen it, it was apparently used to refer to people who do have a legitimate medical condition, rather than people who you just want to insult for being idiots. Yeah. But I just although I can see it's offensive, I just can't not be fond of it.
Actually, no, it's not politically correct to even use retarded to refer to someone who's mentally challenged.
Well, see, mentally challenged to me is not a better word. But anyway, I tend to use it towards people that I don't like. It's meant to be offensive, and I think it's the perfect word to describe, say, a lot of policy making in countries like Australia and the UK, and a lot of the people who run those countries. I mean, look, yesterday there was quite a cute little pic going around on Facebook. It was a map of Australia with a huge health and safety sign plastered on it, and the sign said "Danger, currently managed by morons." Right, and it's absolutely true. The last few governments have been packed to the rafters with morons, and the morons are actually the nice ones. I mean, the rest of them are just frankly evil, So I mean, it was a clever pick, because to put that message onto a health and safety sign points out an irony in Australia. Namely that it's become one of those countries where everything has a health and safety sign slapped on it. And arguably, one result of that is the population has been so dumbed down that they voted in a bunch of retards.
I agree with you about the political correctness has also got is connected to health and safety as well, and it's just becoming as another form of control, and putting things like this coffee is hot on McDonald's because of that woman, that stupid woman who sued because she spilt hot coffee on her and was surprised that it was hot.
Yeah.
I mean, again, they should have kicked that out of court and said this is ridiculous. But instead, they made every single company in the world have to put this coffee is hot. And I think we should stop pandering to stupid little cases and getting everyone in the world to change their behaviour, as they do at airports now, criminalising every single person who goes through the airport, almost sort of treating every single person as a terrorist, when you don't need to, it's got out of control. There's a massive reaction to small problems. Yeah,
absolutely. So I liked this little Facebook meme, or whatever you want to call it. But the thing that occurred to me after our little talk last night is that if that had said "Danger, currently managed by retards," it wouldn't have spread nearly so widely, because the word's been deemed offensive. But I think it's an entirely appropriate word, frankly. I mean, using it doesn't intend any disrespect to people with a genuine mental illness. When I use it, I absolutely do mean to offend people. But the people I'm referring to are a different kind of people. I'm saying, you have a mental deficiency that prevents you from thinking like an adult, whereas in fact you don't have that excuse. You're just a massive idiot. So,
there's one thing I wanted to say. I don't know, it's just something to think about. I mean, some people would argue that, yes, you're using that word to try and offend the other an individual directly. But what you're doing is linking them to a group of people who have a problem. Like, for example, people often used to say spastic. You spastic.
Mm-hmm.
Now this was connected to a serious condition. So you're saying that you're using it as a derogatory term. So I guess there is a little bit of again, a respect. You have to sort of bear in mind respect. But I think it's got out of control. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think so too. In this case, I mean, I don't know if I really can do my use of this word. I just like it because it does cut people. But I will say that I feel like the people down there at the moment in Canberra's Parliament House are implicit in mass murder or manslaughter at the very least. And I actually feel like the small offence that might result, if I call them an offensive name, it's pretty trivial compared to how important it is to call out these retards on their awful crimes. And when I do that, I want to use the strongest language possible. So I'm sticking with it.
I still maintain you should be able to say any word you like. I don't think there should be restrictions, but deal with the consequences. If you use a word and someone finds it offensive, have a chat with them, explain why you used it. That's all we need to do. We don't need to avoid saying any words, because the intent is the main thing again. Because I just wanted to talk about the nigger word again. because I think it illustrates the point of the intent again. I mean, two black guys, and actually, if I said two black rappers, that's probably politically incorrect of me to say, because that's stereotyping people. But if they said, "All right, my nigger," they're just being friendly. But then if someone else could say it in a more derogatory way, then it's offensive. So it just matters. The situation, the context does matter.
Absolutely. Though you are moving into a kind of a different area there about owning the insult, which is something that's it's a very widespread phenomenon. I mean, gay people owning the word fag, for example, and that's a way of using language to empower yourself where you've previously been denied any power. And I think that's why it is okay for a black person to refer to another black person as a nigger, because it's taking away what used to be an insult and using it as a form of identification.
I don't like to use that word at all, really, in any situation, but I defend the right of anyone who wants to use it, even if they want to use it in a racist way. Say it. Do what you want to do. At least people will know who you are and what you stand for. Yeah. And they can respond accordingly. They can call you a racist. Deal with the consequences. So stop controlling what everyone's going to say. Everyone can say what they like and deal with the consequences.
Yeah, I agree. I want to go back to something that you said at the start, which was that people are recommending that you have to talk to each person and find out what they're okay with and what they find offensive. Now, at the start, you mentioned that was just a bit silly, but just now you said if you're not sure whether somebody finds something offensive, just talk to them. And I agree with that.
I mean after. I don't mean before. So what I'm saying is, say whatever you want to say. If someone's offended, they'll tell you, or maybe they won't. It doesn't matter. If they do, then deal with it. I'm not. But I'm saying, finding out what offends people and controlling your language before you say it doesn't need to happen.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that in some cases you just need to go case by case, and it's not that difficult to do. There's an example which, again, you mentioned at the start. In Australia, the term disabled people was replaced a long time ago by people with disabilities, because the argument was that a lot of these folks preferred people-centered language rather than condition-centered language. Okay, so fine. But then the PC Brigade went a step further, and they invented the term differently abled. Now, presumably the idea was to get the dis out of disabled, right? So, have a way of referring to these people without mentioning any kind of limitation or anything negative. Now personally, I think differently abled is just an incredibly silly term, and it's also counterproductive, because what it says is basically this: your condition is so horrible and disturbing to me that I can't even bring myself to acknowledge it or mention it. So I'm going to self-consciously avoid this by inventing some bullshit term instead. But subsequent to to this term, differently abled, coming into common usage, you had a number of people with disabilities coming out and saying that they hated all the PC terms that had been invented for them. But that wasn't every person in a wheelchair, or every amputee or paraplegic person or person with cerebral palsy. It wasn't all of them. It was only some. So what started to become clear then was that some people with disabilities felt more respected by these politically correct terms, and others thought it was a wank.
I just wanted to say, so what if they felt more respected? No offence. But if we're going to treat disabled people equally with people who aren't disabled, we don't treat them any better either. So you don't have to be, I think it would be condescending to treat a disabled person in a more respectful way than you treat a non-disabled person. So just because they like to be referred to in a different way, I'd quite like it if every time I walk through a door, someone said "sir," but hello, sir. Well, maybe I'd like it. Maybe I'd like it for a day or two anyway.
Yeah, I actually get that sometimes here, and it's not comfortable.
Well, yeah, anyway. I was just being joking a bit, but what I mean is, just because we like to be referred to in a certain way doesn't mean everyone in society even if you're disabled or not, has to do that.
I know what you mean, but let me read a small excerpt to you from a blog that is written by a person with a disability. It goes like this. When I say I'm disabled, I'm not reducing myself to my disability. Just as I'm not reducing myself to my gender or my race when I say that I'm a woman or that I'm Asian. Being disabled is one part of my multifaceted identity. Each of these parts overlaps with the other, blurs into each other, intersects with each other. They're not separated or disparate. It's important for me to define who I am, and being disabled is an important part of how I define myself. So this is a person who is not on board with the PC terminology. And there's a photo of her in her blog, and the photo has her holding a placard, and the placard says autistic and proud. So this is one view. She's saying all this PC stuff just kind of makes you look as though you're ashamed of your body or your mind or whatever. And I think that's quite a relevant and powerful point. But other people with disabilities would disagree.
And this is
my answer to all of this.
I was going to say this is the point. Everyone has their own different opinion, so you can't change you can't change what you say. You're not going to please everyone. So just carry on saying what you're going to say.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's pretty simple to deal with that. I mean, if you have, say, a colleague or an acquaintance with a disability, find out what language they feel comfortable with and just use that. Because it shouldn't be about making yourself comfortable. That's where PC language, that's where it is a negative thing, where it's not about the people that you're supposed to be respecting, it's about you. Yeah.
I think it's great to respect people, but you can't practically go around every time you speak asking people how they, what words they like and how they prefer to be referred to. You can sometimes, and it's always nice as a gesture, but you can't do that,
You can't do it all the time, no. But as I said, like if you say for example, you work with someone in a wheelchair, just ask them. It's not, and if people who like to use PC language are using it for the reasons they claim to, then their goal should be to make others feel included and comfortable and so on. So I think case by case is sometimes the way to go, because then you can really achieve that. If you try to make everybody use the same language, then it's not about that at all. It's about controlling, and it goes back to what the anti-PC brigade argue in Australia, that it's trying to make everybody think like the latte liberals.
Anthony, I like lattes. I told you already.
That's why I had to throw it in one more time.
Okay. I just wanted to mention a case. Ellie Goulding. Have you heard of her?
Sounds familiar. Who's this person?
She's a singer, quite a good singer actually. She did a very nice cover of Elton John's song called Your Song. You might recognise her or recognise her music if you heard it. She's quite famous anyway. I think she might be from the UK. Anyway, she has been vilified in the news as from yesterday because she wore a Native American costume. I think it was actually in Halloween. Maybe she did it. She wore a Native American. I was going to say naked. That would maybe even be more offensive. I don't know. But she wore a Native American costume. And she has been in the media, who I think are responsible for a lot of this political correctness nonsense. She's been vilified for not respecting the Native American people because she wore this costume for Halloween. And there's a lot of this going on with Halloween now. If you wear certain costumes, if you wear a cowboy outfit, then that's offensive to Native Americans. If you wear a Native American costume, that's offensive. There are limits, maybe. I mean, I know Prince Harry wore a Nazi outfit to a party, but then some members of his family are Nazis, so what do you expect?
That's a little tasteless, and I think it would be equally tasteless if he came to a Halloween party as one half of a rhinoceros.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you may be referring to some of the things I've been posting recently about the hypocrisy of the royal family, who are, campaigning for things like the World Wildlife Fund and against the ivory trade, when Buckingham Palace has the largest collection of ivory in the world, and they often go on hunting parties, shooting rhinos and elephants.
See, I would again tend to side with the PC brigade up to an extent on this issue of Halloween, Thanksgiving, and so on. I'm not American, so I don't feel really comfortable wading into this argument. But I do think that, you know, people who are trying to display a little bit of sensitivity are not to be criticized for that, as long as they don't try and impose it on other people. I would also say that part of it may come from the fact that there was a period in American movie history where, like, the John Wayne style Western was you know, legion, and you know, Native American people were portrayed as a kind of herd mentality killing machine, and the cowboys were portrayed as you know, the kind of defenders of civilization against these savages, and you know, the reality of that situation was far removed from that. So I think you know, a little bit more time has passed, and people have had a chance to reflect on that and think, okay, so perhaps some of those images that I was shown or my parents were shown were very unfair, and perhaps we should show that we understand that now, because it's a worthwhile gesture to say, look, we understand that you know, you are not you have not been treated fairly, and we're trying to not make amends is not quite the right phrase, but we're trying to acknowledge unfair representations and unfair policies and so on of the past. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah, but that's a completely different issue. Ellie Goulding wearing a Native American costume, it has nothing to do with any of that. This is the problem with political correctness. It's not about offending people. She was wearing a Native American costume because she thought it looked cute, and she did look cute in it. And why are people in the PC brigade assuming that it was a negative thing anyway? In fact, they're being more offensive because are they saying that all Native Americans are evil and wrong, and you shouldn't dress up as one? What are they actually saying? I mean, she's just dressing up as a Native American. So how can that be bad?
It seems a little odd. It does seem a little odd.
It's constant. People are getting sick of this constant bombardment. But should we move on just quickly to connected to health and safety, but also the work environment? I was talking to you the other day about teaching as well.
Yeah, this is quite this is where the political correctness issue crosses over from just being about language into being about actions, and I think it is quite a serious issue. So yes, go for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, with the Ellie Goulding situation, that's about actions as well, because she wasn't saying anything; she was just costumed as well. But you know, in teachers' classrooms, anyone who works in the UK now and a lot of Western countries will know that as a teacher, because of the paedophile situation, which is a serious issue, but there's still a minority of people. It's quite rare. Because of this issue, we're now all being controlled and treated like paedophiles. For our own protection is the word I often get quoted, but I disagree. I'll take my chances. I'd prefer to continue acting like a human being than being controlled and not being allowed to, for example, if a class of younger people leave the room, I'm no longer allowed to be in the room alone with one person. The door must always be open. There's lots of rules. I'm not allowed to touch them, not allowed to give them a hug. So if they're crying, even if they're crying or they're upset about something, I'm not allowed to touch them, not allowed to give them a hug. And I'm getting sick of the whole thing. I'm a human being. If a child's crying, I want to react like a human being and give them a hug, which is perfectly normal, natural thing to do. I'm not a paedophile. So I should be able to do it without constant people telling me basically political correctness is now controlling what we do. And I think you allow this to continue, and over a period of 100 years, people will literally have their entire day mapped out for them before they start.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it cuts off many possibilities of normal human relations. And I've had the experience as well. I spent a year teaching in Moscow, and in that time, at the beginning of that year, I was given a class of kids, 6 to 8 years old, about 7 to 9 years old, and it was very difficult at first, to really get through to these kids, because, big scary foreign man with a beard, and I remember there was one lesson where I sat down to read them a story. The kids were all sat behind their desks, and I'd never touched them or gone anywhere near them physically, because in my culture that would just be, I'd be in court before you knew it. So I'm sitting down reading a story to these kids, and suddenly one of them comes up and sits on my knee, and I'm petrified because I'm thinking, right, I've lost my job. And then, like one by one, it was a small class. It was only there were only 6 students in the class. And one by one, they all come up and just sort of gather around. One of them's got like her head on my shoulder, and one's, like kind of got his arm around me, and I'm kind of covered in kids, right? but that was the breakthrough lesson. And after that, I got along much better with this group of people, and I found out, what great people they were, and just being in close physical proximity to people is an immensely powerful thing. Take that away from society, and you really lose something.
You would have lost your job for a start.
Yeah.
In the UK, I would say, if you'd been someone had walked in on you at that point, you would have lost your job, and that's a shame. I think it's a real shame. I mean, and things are different in different countries. I think I told you the other day the little story of after spending time teaching in the UK and then going to the Ukraine and teaching English over here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to go back unexpectedly because of an illness.
Yep.
And my class, 2 girls in my class came up to me and tried to give me a hug to say goodbye. And
Mm-hmm.
I automatically flinched, put my arms up in the air and sort of went, oh no, sort of, because I've been trained to do this in the UK, like you must never let a child touch you. And
Yep.
they were highly offended and
Yeah.
really upset.
Yep.
And I never had the chance to explain to them why I did that. And
Yeah.
I just think it's horrendous. I'm never going to do that again. And it's a pity that one day I might have to lose my job just for being a human being,
Yeah, I totally agree. Turkey is a reasonably tactile culture, and my students touch me quite often. I never initiate it, but yesterday, end of one of my lessons, one of my students, Yunus, just walked out of the classroom and kind of patted me on the back and said, have a good weekend. And that just happens all the time, or people will touch your arm while they're talking to you, whatever, and it's completely normal. And I don't think, I just don't see the problem. I really, really don't.
I mean, in other countries, it's maybe gone too far in the other direction. In Thailand, they physically smack them around the face with their hand if they misbehave, and I found that a little bit offensive myself, because there was like kids crying everywhere because they've been smacked around the face.
God. Yeah. So I don't know. What do you think? Have we achieved any measure of agreement on this issue or not?
I think we obviously agree on some things, but I still think I'd love to get rid of the whole thing altogether, political correctness, and just go back to people saying exactly what they think and dealing with the consequences. But I wanted to mention a few more cases.
Sure, why not?
In Iran, a woman has been imprisoned for attending a men's volleyball match.
Oh, good.
Women were banned from volleyball matches because they would see lewd behaviour from men.
So
they were banned from attending, rather than lewd behaviour being banned by the men. Women were banned from attending.
Of course, yeah.
So she's being imprisoned, I think, for a year or more because of this, attending a match. So this appears to be retarded to me, again, to use this politically incorrect word. And yet, actually, me talking about this and saying that this talking about another culture, what they do in Iran, am I being politically incorrect by sort of criticising this? Because it does seem that criticising other cultures is wrong as well. It's not politically correct. So, and it links back into what we were talking about before, how people are tiptoeing around different cultures, being careful not to offend, and in some cases that's resulting in people dying, being imprisoned. So is it okay to criticise another culture, do you think?
I think it is, and I'll give you an example of this again. So in Turkey, management culture is very hierarchical and authoritarian, and so your manager just says, go and do this, and you go and do it. There's not a lot of discussion if that's your manager. And so because I work with a mixture of Turkish and foreign people, and did the same last year, so the British manager in the last university where I worked was probably more authoritarian than the average manager in Britain, because he'd been in Turkey for a long time, but much less authoritarian than the average manager in Turkey. Now, that is, I think that there has been a lot of comment about that. There is a lot of comment about that in Turkey, about the authoritarian style of management. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, it is good for people to come in from outside and say, wow, we don't do it this way. And we think, if you try a little bit of our way, you might find there are benefits to it. Of course, you have to be willing to reciprocate. If somebody says, well, we've been doing it this way thousands of years, and we find the benefits are X, Y, and Z, you have to be open to that as well. But I've observed how breaking down a little bit of this authoritarian management culture has benefited the organisations where foreigners come in and start saying, no, that's a little bit too much for me. Let's just dial it down a bit.
Well, this is the thing I was mentioning before. Like, out of respect, you wouldn't start trying to impose your views on the culture that you're a guest of.
No, that's right. But nor would I. I would be happy to suggest another way of doing things. I mean, it depends on the issue, of course. But in the example that I just gave, I think it's okay to say this is too much. Let's try it another way. And then, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Okay, well, anyway, as you said, that is for another show, maybe. But
it is.
Let's wind down political correctness by. I'll say that I think all of it should go. I'd welcome the day when all political correctness was banned. Or to impose your view of what other people should say on anyone. I think there should. I just think with most things in life there should be total freedom, and it's up to the individual to be responsible for their actions. Be responsible for what you say. Be respectful to other people, which should be maybe instilled. It should come naturally, really. But education is going to be part of that. But don't tell anyone else what to say or do.
Yep. Fair enough. I will partially dissent by saying that I think certain forms of political correctness serve a very useful purpose. And the example that I gave before about Ukraine versus the Ukraine, in my case, I'm using that against people whose actions I feel are offensive, and I think that sometimes language can be used to maybe not shut down, but certainly reject ideas you think are offensive. Whether that's politically correct language or other forms of language, if it works, use it.
Can we finish this show by you saying something politically incorrect, Anthony?
What would you like me to say, Scott?
I would not like to impose my controls of your speech on you.
What can I say that's politically incorrect? I don't know. I am not a big fan of the fight for gay marriage. How's that?
That's pretty good. You're not a big fan of the fight for gay marriage. So you don't think people should fight for gay people to get married?
In Australia, it's been the church versus the gay community, and I kind of think the gay community should completely ignore the church. Why would any gay person want to go into a church and be married after the horrendous treatment they've received at the hands of the church? So all these people fighting for their right to go into a church and be married, I find it kind of silly.
Yeah, no, I can see where you're coming from there, actually, yeah.
I've said that within earshot of a few gay people who have gone, ah! So
well, exactly.
I think it's probably a politically incorrect thing to say.
Very well done. That was a very good example. I agree with you, yeah. But yeah, what you said was politically incorrect. You're homophobic. You're very homophobic. You're clearly racist because you've said some racist words. during this episode, and you're probably sexist as well. I'm sure you said something offensive. So Anthony, go away, think about what you've said today, and try to do something about it.
Deal with my shame.
Deal with your shame, and you've got a week or so maybe to think about what you said and come back and talk to us again.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye. So
remember to tell us what you think. Leave a voicemail or go to the chat room. truthsentinel9.blogspot.co.uk. As mentioned, we've got shorter Sentinel debates, Sentinel chats on the same channel to check out. And finally, we're going to go to Phil to have a talk about Utopia and alternative sort of societies, problems in societies, and how we can try to find better alternatives. We're going to use his first name, but we're not going to use his second name, so I'm going to call him Philanthropist. I'm not sure if he'll like that, but Phil does spend a lot of time volunteering in places like Thailand and Burma as a relief and development worker. Let's find out more about Phil, who'll be coming on from time to time to talk about the problems in society, but more on a lighter note, looking at alternatives for a more utopian replacement society. We were planning to have a longer chat, but we had some technical issues, so I've salvaged what I can. And Phil will be coming back from time to time, but basically we'll be looking at all aspects of society, such as ideas about utopian societies, things we would change about education, provision of basic needs, housing, land, food, water, energy, entertainment and the arts, creativity, relationships, military defence, government and leadership, borders, countries, brainstorming alternatives, looking at eco-villages, looking at currencies like Bitcoin, what else? Looking at things like different types of education like Montessori, basically looking at a lot of things. So I'll just play today some of the things I've managed to salvage. It's only a brief taster of what's coming. So over to Phil now. So today we're going to do a bit of a show about Utopia, looking at the way society functions now and maybe brainstorming alternatives. People have always dreamed of a perfect place to live, and some people refer to that place as Utopia. I think it was Thomas More, the English philosopher, who coined the phrase. And with our crooked, corrupt, tyrannical world that we have at the moment, probably heading for economic collapse, we need to start looking at alternatives. There's no use complaining about the current system if we don't start thinking about what we really want. So today we're going to look at that, and it's very unlikely we're going to get it right first time. But maybe you can join in and give your ideas by using the voicemail service or writing to us, letting us know what you think. My next guest is philanthropist, traveller and relief and development worker Phil, who's going to discuss some alternatives to our current way of living. Hi Phil, welcome to Truth Sentinel.
Hi Scott, thanks for inviting me on.
You're always welcome. Could you give us a brief overview of your background? I understand you did some relief work in Thailand and some other places. Just give us a little idea of the kind of things you do.
Yeah, I guess the kind of things I do is really varied, or has been really varied in the past, and this is partly due to my education background, which I have to say I hated school. I hated every minute of my schooling. And when I left school and kind of went out into the world, I really didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to be happy. And to do what I wanted to do as a job was even more confusing to me. So I guess I started exploring the world a bit, and this took me into lots of different kinds of jobs, lots of different fields of study, everything from working on a farm to working in animal care, from a scuba diving instructor to an environmental tutor. And I finally ended up doing a master's degree in sustainable development, and through a series of coincidences ended up in Ghana working with a friend of mine who helped me to set up a small NGO, a small charity, and started a project for the sustainable development of the township in the Ashanti region. And later on, a few years later, I ended up in Thailand working on a similar project to build a self-sufficient village for Burmese refugees. And I met an American guy out there who was running a small children's home, and I spent about 3 years on the Burmese border with a small kind of family, or a very small children's home of, again, Burmese orphans. And then I ran out of money. I had to return to England, spent a couple of years saving some money, and right now I'm out in Portugal looking after a small permaculture project for another friend of mine. So I'm up in the Portuguese mountains right now, in the very far north.
Sounds very nice.
Yeah, it's a good place to be. It's kind of a much more backward lifestyle in a way than in England. It's not so fast paced. There are still kind of horses and carts on the roads every now and then, and then people sort of grow as much of their own food as they can in their own gardens and have animals and stuff. So it's almost like stepping back into the sort of 1950s, 1960s era. So yeah, it's a nice place to be.
What I thought we could start off with is talking a bit about what's wrong with our current society. I mean, governments in the last few centuries have actually killed millions of their own citizens around the world. And that's not including the millions killed in wars. The state chooses where, when, and what people learn, who they can live with, where they can live, what medicine they can receive. People have to spend all their time working, doing stuff they don't want to do for little reward, and not spending so much time with nature and being creative. And life is becoming a lot more complicated for a lot of people, with technology, all the technology and our hectic lifestyles. More and more, everything seems to be leading to people maybe becoming less happy, and there seems to be problems with work, entertainment, romance, health, education. Maybe life needs to be simpler with a focus on nature and creativity, and people really do need to care about each other more, that's clear. How about you? What do you think is wrong with our current society?
Well, it's quite a big topic to talk about, and I could spend the next few days actually perhaps talking about some of the things that are wrong with the society. But in a way, a lot of it boils down to education for me. And I did tell you before, I had a really bad education experience. And it wasn't necessarily because the schools or the teachers were that bad, but it was because I was really sensitive to all of this. I don't know, for some reason it affected me a lot. And the way teachers talked to us, the way other students treated each other, and what we were actually being taught, it just didn't. Some of it just didn't make sense to me. It was just cramming lots of knowledge into your brain so that you could regurgitate it later in a test or even later on an exam, and that would then supposedly determine your life path, you know. And I didn't want my life path determined by a few things that I didn't really fully understand, where the information was just fed to me by teachers. I actually wanted to understand life for myself, and this is partly why my life path took me in a kind of crazy fashion, searching all over the world and in different jobs, amongst different people of different backgrounds, so that I could really get a better understanding of what life is about. And this is partly why I think society has gone wrong. It's not that society is necessarily fully wrong in itself. It's just that too many people do not question which direction society is going in. It's like the majority of people are kind of led along a path that they feel that they don't even, how do you say, they don't have any critical analysis of. So usually if a piece of information is presented to us and have an analytical brain, we criticize it, not in the way of you're bad and you're not worthy or whatever, but more in terms of analyzing it in a critical way. So, are you good for me? Asking some objective questions. And in that way, we can determine for ourselves whether this particular piece of information is true, or if it's worth listening to, if it's worth taking on board, if it's worth applying to the way we lead our lives. But too many of us, we don't do that because we're never taught in school to analyze in a critical manner. We're never taught to look at things in an objective fashion. Basically, we're just given, like I said, given loads of information that we then regurgitate in some form or other later on.
A lot of people say education is just basically mind control from the government, and it's clear that it rewards you for accepting a certain point of view. You have to learn all these facts, and then you have to write those facts back down in the form of an essay, for example, and you have to write down the accepted view if you want to get a higher grade. If you deviate from certain viewpoints and you don't back it up with what somebody famous has already said before, then you're not going to get a good grade. That's the way that it controls the way people think.
That's right. And not only that, the way people are determining those grades is based upon a narrow section of criteria. It's not a very wide range of criteria. It's based on, like you said, how many other people who have become renowned scholars, for example, have written the same sort of thing in papers that they've written, or in documents or in books. But it doesn't mean to say that what you write is wrong. That just seems to be a bit crazy, kind of saying when somebody comes up with a unique or alternative idea about a piece of information, about a piece of history, for example, if it doesn't go along with the books that are part of the curriculum, then you're going to be given a bad grade, which is insane to me. It doesn't make sense. When people are taught to think more creatively and to give different ideas of what might have happened in the past or what is happening now, surely that leads to a bit more open-mindedness and a bit more of a fair way of judging what is going on at the moment or what is going on in the past.
And also, it does reward a certain type of person more than another type of person, because people have different ways of learning and different brain types. You know, some people are visual learners, some people are more analytical, and some people are good at learning facts, and some people are less good at learning sort of a memorized list of facts, but better in some other areas. Some people are more kinesthetic, or some people react better to audio. This has all been proven by scientists in the education field. And yet, we only reward people, in the current system of qualifications. We only seem to focus on a certain type of learner.
That's right, yeah. And the positive thing about this is that people are recognizing this sort of thing, and it's slowly creeping into the mainstream schooling system. But it's been around for many decades now in the alternative schooling system. And there are various different examples of that in the Waldorf schools, the Rudolf Steiner schools, the Montessori system of learning, and various other independent alternative institutions. So the change is slowly happening. But like I said, this is one of the problems with society at the moment, is that too many people, the vast majority of people, haven't received that way of thinking for themselves, of learning how to learn for themselves. And learning how to learn means that you don't just take on board information, you explore it, and you use life, you use the world around you to explore the subject area that you want to learn about.
So let's talk a bit about utopian schools. I mean, what do you think a school would be like in a utopian society? Would it be homeschooling? Would people still go to a central area? Would we rely on technology and stay at home and use Skype and things like that? Or what do you think for you would be a utopian school?
I still like the idea of having a school. I like homeschooling because it has so many benefits compared to the mainstream schooling system. But when you actually have a central sort of place for schooling, it means you're exposed to so many more different types of people, and you get an opportunity to learn how to live with those people, to see the differences in people, the way people behave, the way people are, their characteristics, and to appreciate what that uniqueness is about each individual. Whereas when you're homeschooled, it can be a bit too insular, a bit too much in the bubble. But I guess when you ask about what a utopian school would be like, I think part of what it would look like is where the teachers, they don't teach so much. What they're trying to do is guide, and they're trying to guide each individual so that each person grows up in a way and develops in a way that is unique to themselves. So this for me is like the expansion of consciousness, not only in each individual but in the human race as a whole. Because it allows for much more diversity, and when you have diversity, you have so many more pathways for a sort of successful life, basically, creating successful ecosystems, creating successful habitats or homes.
Is there anything you would add to the curriculum, like, conventional schools teach maths, English, sports and biology and the sciences? Is there anything you think should be added or taken away?
Yeah, definitely. Loads of things could be added and loads of things taken away. And what I would take away, first of all, is the separation between each subject area. Because what's the point in learning these now, in this day and age? What's the point in learning these things separately? They're all integrated into a holistic system. And this is one of the words that I would use for a utopian schooling system is more holistic. So bring all these subject areas together and see how they apply in real daily life. And not only that, the things that I would really add are things about emotions. Like, most people in the world really don't know how to deal with their emotions because they're a hard thing to tackle. They're not easily able to understand through the brain, by thinking. Emotions are quite a kind of a chaotic part of our lives, but everyone experiences them at some point or other, and often we learn to suppress these things because these emotions, these feelings, because they can be really traumatic. And if we've seen our parents, for example, just have one small argument when we're very young, like between the ages of sort of 3 and 7, that can create a traumatized environment for us because we see a lot of anger and a lot of hurt, a lot of suffering, just in a short space of time, but we don't know how to deal with those feelings that arise inside us as a child. So this creates traumatic experiences kind of later on in life when those same emotions are triggered by our daily life circumstances. So I would definitely have something about like learning how to deal with emotions, definitely something about learning how to have relationships. What is our relationship with people around us? Because it seems schooling takes that for granted, that we would just know how to make friends, how to be sociable, how to speak in front of an audience, and all these things. These are all parts of our relationship.
So, we just come back from our break. I've made myself a coffee. Phil, you were talking about some of the things that were wrong with society. We touched on education.
So I talked a little bit about education, but I made a long list of different things that I just kind of were thoughts to me, I guess, about what is wrong with society. And I'll just go through that list quite briefly. So technology is one of the things that I think is partly a problem, not the technology itself, but why certain technologies are made. And I guess in the past I felt that a lot of technology and new inventions were geared towards discovery and the exploration of life. But nowadays, more often than not, a lot of new inventions seem to be more geared towards consumption and just being there to be sold to make someone money. And this creates so many different problems, quite apart from the waste and the kind of the often toxic waste from new technologies. There are loads of other issues that go beyond just the waste, just the end life of a product. So another thing on my list was about how many technologies are made with planned obsolescence, and also I touched upon waste just now, but waste is a huge problem in our society at the moment too. We throw so many things away, and it's all in the background. We don't see where the big landfill sites are. They're all kind of hidden. But we know we have finite resources. So what happens in the future? What happens to all that waste? Where does it all go? And then we've got nature, which has become something to be conquered, something to be controlled.
Let us know your views on utopian ideas for alternative societies. Remember, blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of truth. Albert Einstein. Please donate if you can. I'm going to wrap up this episode pretty soon. Help donate. You can get a t-shirt, remember, for Christmas, to make ideal Christmas presents. Just email us, scottsentinel9@gmail.com. Make a donation of, let's say, I'm going to be flexible with it basically. More than £20 would be nice. More than $20, more than £20. And if you send me an email, with your address, your size, you can have a Truth Sentinel t-shirt for Christmas with the Einstein quote on the back and the Truth Sentinel logo on the front. You can see pictures if you go to Scott Sentinel on Twitter, and I usually put up pictures on the episode itself anyway. Basically, come and check us out on Facebook, Twitter. Thanks for listening. Just one more time, scottsentinel9@gmail.com. Respect to other shows like Alex Jones, Hagman, Freeman, Fly, Mark Cocking, John Geary, David Icke, Pete Wicker, Sheila Zielinski, UK Column, The Average Liberator, Lip TV and Buzzsaw. We'll have episodes coming up on missing persons, time travel, Dyatlov Pass incident, religious cults, Scientology, anarchy, parallel universes, the control of scientific fact, Utopia, Noah's Ark and the Flood, revolution, Truth Alliance discussions on world events, and anything else we can think of. Catch you later. Goodbye.